Hi guys, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I don't know, depending on the time that you'll be watching this video here. Uh, Remember the previous video we talked about what we need to know about operations management. And this is actually, I can't say second part, but I would just say it's a complementary part of that. This part only focuses on productivity, and nobody talks about operations without talking about productivity. Nobody talks about production without talking about productivity. Now, remember the companies that we have mentioned last time. You take a company like Macro. For those that are not in South Africa, Macro is one of the biggest companies here that sell product in bulk. Then we also got Starbucks. We also got Netflix, McDonald's, Apple. All those brands here. They always got a way to assess productivity. And in terms of productivity, we mostly looking at like the output, whatever you are bringing out on the table. Now, productivity is not mostly looked on a perspective of a customer, but it is mostly looked on a perspective of the manager or the one that is between bracket purchasing or dealing with productivity. Now, the part is just you as a manager, you need first of all to be able to assess your productivity. And in this part here, we are going to look at what productivity is all about, how to calculate it, and how to improve it. Now, here they define productivity as a ratio of the output between between so it is the ratio of your output over your input. So that is actually the formula. So what is happening is like we need to check what have we produced over how much input, how much resources we have used. This is actually the basic formula of productivity, and it's always the same. Now, depending on the service, depending on the input, depending on the output, you'll find that the different content are going to vary. Now, generally, productivity is mostly seen as a measure just to improve your to improve, to assess your improvement or to assess the result of the outcome that you are making. So it is generally an output that is relative between bracket. It's relative to the input. That's why I told you that if you have a company that is using material, maybe in terms of liters, in terms of waters, for example, there's another company that assesses in terms of capital invested per labor, for example. So it can be used in different ways as much as the formula remains the same, which is output over your input. The most important thing is just that it can be relative depending on the different input. I think as we do one or two exercises or a case study, it will make it a little bit easier for you to get what I'm talking about. One thing that is important is just that it is only through productivity that one person can claim that they want to improve the living experience or they want to improve the customer satisfaction experience. At the end of the day, it is more about what you are producing. That is the most important thing. It's about how you are producing, what you're producing. If there's a way to improve it, let go for it. Now, in terms of calculation, there's what we call, remember we say that productivity is relative in terms of the input. Now, there's what we call labor productivity, for example. It is a type of productivity that focuses only on labor. And in this case, for example, they will give you need to know first of all what is the number of units that the company has produced, and then how many hours the company has worked to produce those number of units. Here we just have a basic example. If you have a company that produces 1,000 units and they are using 250 hours to produce those units, the productivity it is 4 units per labor hour. So it means every time that there's an hour that passes in terms of labor, this is what the company is manufacturing between bracket, and this is the productivity. Now assume that there's another company that maybe is producing 1,000 units in 250 hours, yet they are producing it 240. Obviously the productivity will be quite high. Why? Because they are producing the same number of units but in a lower time. That is actually how productivity works. Now, on top of that, there's also what we call the how do you call this? Productivity, but in terms of I call it multifactor productivity. So this is a productivity that is not just based on one factor. Remember, when you talk about labor productivity, you're only looking at labor. There can also be material productivity. There can also be capital productivity. That is a productivity that focuses only on the labor, only on one resource that has been used. But there's also what we call a multi-factor productivity. So this is the productivity that most of the time include everything that is involved in production. I think in the previous video, in the most recent one that we have done about operation management, we showed that every process got an input, a transformation process, and an output. So by input, we say that it is everything that an organization uses to add value to the final product, which can be labor, it can be material, it can be people, it can be the facility. So with this formula here, as we are talking, we are mostly referring to by input that is down here. Remember, the main formula is output over input. Then in this case, the inputs are mixed. Everything that is input, it can be the labor, it can be the material, it can be the energy, it can even be the capital. By miscellaneous, we mean any other activity or any other item that has been used in the production. Now, the most important thing here is because every input got its own unit. Labor can be in terms of hours, material can be in liters, in pound, in kilograms, and then we have the energy, which can be as well in kilowatt, and then you can have the capital that can be in dollars, in rand, or whatever monetary value it can be. So the purpose of this part here, you need to turn everything into one unit, which becomes between bracket a monetary value, because everything can be valuated in terms of money. Then because of that, now you will have a common value here that you take the output, you divide by everything that you got. Now in this case here, that's why they say that outputs and inputs are often expressed in monetary value. So what we are going to do, we are going to take a case study in our next video, whereby we're gonna look at how it applies, mostly the practical part about productivity and how one person can assess. So thank you so much for this short video, but I wanted to brief you mostly about production and productivity and how it works. Now in our next video, let's talk about